It is 9:03. Good morning, and as shared previously, we are continuing to do our work sessions, and these sessions are designed to be open for those in the community to have the opportunity to listen and share their thoughts and ideas to us, as we move forward in designing our budget. And we have scheduled a work session this morning from roughly 9 to 11-ish, and then this afternoon, roughly 1 p.m. to 4-ish, and we'll see where that goes. We obviously have a lot of work to do, but as we do prior to getting into that work, why don't we take a moment and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, you build up some habits, not necessarily traditions, but habits, I guess, when you're at the dais or when you're in work sessions. And I remember, at least with the last board, every time we're in work sessions, we never wore ties. And so we were up on the dais and we'd wear a tie, and then if we had a work session that afternoon, we'd all be stripping off our ties and saying, okay, let's get to work. I don't know if that was symbolic or just something that we built into a routine. Now, maybe 4 or 5 of us didn't wear ties, but that's okay. That's a story for another time.
I'm not giving up the tie.
So, got still a lot of work to do. In front of us was given a recap. Appreciate it, Deb and the entire team, on the decisions and discussions that we had made. It's 2 pages. It should say 4/11/23. Before we dive into it, if there's any words of wisdom from Mr. Zaleski, and if not words of wisdom, maybe just words.
Yep.
But
Well,
all of them seem to be
At the very least, I
wise.
have some words.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so as Commissioner Rothstein pointed out, you have a new handout. First page is things you voted on the 4th and where that left you. And on the second page, you can see things you voted on the 6th and then where that left you. You see our current bottom line with all the decisions that you've made so far. And then below that, I just want to touch on a few ideas to maybe help shape your thinking and where we go from here. By law, we have to balance fiscal year '24. I think we need to give some thought to how are we going to go about doing that. But for me, it can't just be about fiscal year '24. We have to consider the implications for the future. And I think in looking at the plan, the board might want to talk about a couple ideas. How are we going to approach this? We're going to balance '24, but what are we going to do with the rest of it? One answer to that could be, we want to get it balanced. That would take some combination of tax increases and service cuts. And my sense is we're not in a position where we think we're going to make that happen for this year. At the other end of this, you could say, we're not worried about it. Let it be whatever it is. I certainly don't want to encourage that thinking. In fact, I actively discourage that thinking. But if we're not going to worry about it, then you're left to say, what series of things do we think has merit to fund, and you can just move ahead. What I'm hoping maybe we'll do is say, okay, yes, it's going to be out of balance. We accept that for this year. But how far out of balance are we willing to have it be? And if we make that decision, then that's going to in some way guide the rest of the decisions, because if you're going to say we're not going to be any more than X out of balance, then everything has to fit in that, which means some things probably don't fit. So then how do we go about making those choices? What's a more important thing to fund than something else is? And again, an idea we come up over and over again. There are lots of things we can sit here and say, this is a good idea, we ought to do it. But we can't fund all the good ideas. Something has to be more important than something else. Then if we do set a limit on how far out of balance we're going to be, and we make some set of decisions, that might bring you back to 24 again. You might have to rethink what you decided in 24 to make it work with the decision you made for the whole plan. Then two things I want to mention to you. The General Assembly accelerated the minimum wage law. The library is more heavily impacted by that than other agencies we fund. Andrea Burstler has already been to you to talk about her concerns about salaries. This increases her concerns. Remember, we have a 3% increase built in for library funding. Whatever they're going to do for salaries has to come out of that 3%. That was already a challenge. Trying to adjust minimum wage is going to make that even more challenging. And then the other thing, we're not in a position to talk deeply about this yet, but I just want you to be aware, there's been some discussion that we need space for the elections. We told you that we are looking at some lease space and trying to develop at least a soft sense of what do we think it would cost to build the same space. Some lease discussions are moving ahead. We're working to try and give you something to look at, to give you some sense of how do we make a comparison here as quickly as we can. I'm hoping even later today we might be able to put something in front of you. It will be less than we'd like it to be because there's a lot of information we don't have yet, a lot of unanswered questions. But we want to at least get you started on being able to consider where we might go. And remember, election space is one of the things that we said is not built into this plan right now. So when we act, that's going to have even more impact on your picture. So unless you have any questions for us, that's all we needed to give you this morning to get you started. Oh, yeah, and one other thing, I so often feel like a nag, but I feel like I have to be again. We are getting close to out of time. You look at it on your schedule and it can seem like it's a lot, but it's not. And we potentially have a lot of things to talk about. So I want to encourage you to feel a sense of urgency and that we need to start figuring out how do we get to the end of this, so that we are not scrambling at the end to try and tie things together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is this is a continuation, so we know where we left off in conversation. Is there a recommendation on starting the conversation or discussion, and we can go from there?
I have one thing real briefly this morning, sort of echoing Ted's points. I had a number of individuals over the past week, as well as some organizations that clearly we interact with, that have reached out. I know in the past there's been a few occasions where the budget may have wrapped up early, and days that might have been potentially on schedule were not used. I'd like us all to at least agree that, given the seriousness of this budget for a variety of reasons, as well as it being the first budget for 4 of us, I'd like us to utilize all these days, even if there's a possibility that we do come to some sense prior, that we continue through next Tuesday and use that day for at least a portion if need be, or the entire time, whichever.
Okay. Yeah, this is to quality, not to quantity, so we will, and if we need to work whatever days, we will, in order to get where we want to go. I agree. Are there any other places where you want to start?
Yes. I think in this building and in almost all individual budgets, the pay increase was at 5.5%. I know it's across a lot of different budgets. What's a percent worth of that? What if it were 4.5%? What does that do to our total budget?
It's in the ballpark of $500,000 per percent.
$500,000 per percentage.
$568,000.
Oh, 568.
Okay.
Now, that does round to .6.
Yep. Well,
No, that was
that was
pretty
not a
close.
rounding error on my part, just my first guess at where we were. But Deb gave me better information.
Joe?
Ted, are you prepared to talk about debt? If I asked about what I sent you an email about last week? Okay.
Yeah, we can, run scenarios for you. Commissioner Bigliotti asked what would happen if we used more cash to replace more bonds and reduce our debt service. Now, this is, we can try and give you a sense. It's a relatively complicated thing because it's not just the dollars, but also the timing. And it's not even the timing of the year you put it in, it's when we expect to sell the bonds. But, in a very rough way, even without trying to show numbers, if you replace $1 million of debt with $1 million of cash, on an annual basis, we'll probably reduce the spending by, say, $80,000 or something along those lines. So $5 million, then we're talking about $300,000.
So nothing demonstrably appreciable.
That by itself is not going to fundamentally change the picture. It's one way of, moving the direction some. And that's, it's a good point. Like you asked about the, what's 1% on salaries. We're talking about the debt. There's very little we can do that by itself can make a big change in what the picture looks like. Most things are, more incremental sort of changes. And we talked a little bit last time about where are the big places, and it's a short list. How much money you send to the school system is a place where we see you could potentially millions of dollars. Ag Pres, you have the potential for $2.5 million. After that, the changes you can make start to diminish.
And Ted, remind me, why can we not use some of that surplus to pay off existing debt? For example, if we, I'm sorry.
It's how debt works. You might have a loan that you can prepay. Our debt doesn't work that way. The only way we can get ahead of the debt is to do what's called a refunding, which is an actual process we go through, just like we do the selling bonds to get out of it early. But
Complicated procedure?
we can't just choose to do it, and we also have to determine, we do get there, we have to evaluate what is the actual savings that we realize. It's not always enough to make it worth the expenditures that you take on to do it. And it's another one, debt service is complicated. It's how much we pay per year changes over the life of the bond. So there's a lot of analysis that has to go into doing that. Now, every year, though, just so you know, we do always look to say, is there an opportunity to do a refunding? And in many years, we have. But like I said, it's not as simple as saying, let's pay ahead, though.
So it's not, let me give something existing like, I don't know, $1 million outstanding for microphones, and we can't just put $1 million to pay off the debt that we have to a microphone company.
Right, because we're not in debt to any companies like that. We have debt in the bonds that we sell. We have debt in connection with our installment purchase agreements for AgPres, thank you. If we have any other debt of any significance, it's not occurring to me.
Johnson Control, but it's just like a lease agreement.
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't really have debt like you were picturing there.
Understood, just trying to come at this from every single possible angle.
What are what is the cost of the debt with the bonds, maybe average or whatever? Is it, with inflation and some of the costs being what they are, is it smart to pay down bonds now, or would we be better off to let them be because they're at a very good rate?
Well, when I said if we're going to consider refunding, we have to do an analysis to see if it makes sense. That would be part of the thinking.
Okay.
So debt has gotten more expensive, but it's still not very expensive. Last one was 3 point something. Yeah, we were selling down close to 1% for a couple of years, so that's changing. But it's historically still inexpensive. And again, when I say that, people listening, we've talked about this already, but sometimes we'll say, well, if it's cheap, why don't we do more debt and get some stuff done? The problem is, you look at our bottom line, we don't have any extra money to pay the debt service. So even if it's cheap, you still have to be able to pay the debt service.
Do you have the, are you able to put up the page on the ag preservation? You know, the 2.5 and the 400, the whatever.
If
I know
Deb says we can, we can.
Say again?
If Deb says we can, we can.
Oh, okay,
She's grabbing it
good.
now.
Yeah, and I know we got it in our books, but I think it would be
Sure.
good.
And again, a reminder, the AgPres page is pretty complicated, but the thing to really focus on is that top line. That's cash you're putting in, that is totally discretionary. You can put it and leave it there, you can make it bigger, you can make it smaller, it's all in your hands.
Line 25, right?
Yes. Right, top line of the funding.
Right. So what's the total?
It's up here.
Is that-
Total funding for AgPres is $5.2 million.
The 5.2. So I understand with the property taxes, if we take $1 million out, does that just drop the total $1 million? Or
Yes.
there's some other ramifications? That essentially does.
No, it is that simple, yep.
So if we took $1 million out of the 2.5, we're still spending 4.2.
Okay, and I say it's that simple, though it could be more complicated as you look ahead. It depends on how much we do cash easements versus IPAs. So if we do an IPA, then we have to reserve the money for 20 years to make sure we can make the payments. So other stuff happens in the mix
Okay.
here. But I think for your purposes, it is as easy as saying, take
Okay.
$1 million out.
Okay. I personally think we have to look at $1 million out of that and maybe $1 million out of the schools, but I don't see how we can do any more than that out of either. And I don't like doing anything out of either, but when you look at the bottom line in -6, that makes it a -4, and we still got some things, and I think, like you said earlier, with the library, there are some things on salary requests we probably need to look at that are gonna cost a little bit.
Yeah, going back to a few things you brought up, definitely, I'm willing to take a look at this, but of course, I'd want to have a conversation with our AgPres folks to make sure that we're not hurting their efforts, which we all know are very long-term efforts. Things start out years in advance. So we could take a look at that. Going back to the salary increases, so my understanding was 5.5% increase was built into the recommended budget. I concur, we need to take a look at that, and if you can provide us with some numbers in terms of, I think that's a good way to go about it, in 0.5% increments, and how much that would affect our bottom line would be, you said it was $500,000 per percentage?
568 per 1%.
Okay. I concur there. We're going to have to take a look at that 6.7 additional ask from school board. We're just going to have to, whether that's $1 million or 1.5 million. I'd like to make sure I understand how that 6.7 broke down again. I know there's some issues there with, we can't tell everybody how to spend their money, but I would like to at least have an understanding, or a refresher, if you will, about what that 6.7 looked like and how it was divided up, so we can try to make an intelligent decision there.
Hey, yes, and there's, in presentations they've done, there's a slide that captures that. We can get copies of that for you. If they get less, they've said, here's what we would do with 6.7. If they get less than 6.7, we don't know what decisions they would make
Okay.
after that.
Yeah, so I think, because I agree, if that's where you want to go, then let's, this morning, get
I have it.
AgPres guys and schools here.
John O'Neill's.
I mean, that's, because we can't wait.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
so
sure.
if we can reach out to the schools to see if they can either come in this morning and to our AgPres and get them here to allow us to make more informed decisions. I agree.
Sure.
Okay, that's your call, but I'm not sure there's much to be gained, because I think the superintendent's answer is going to be, I can't answer that before the board decides.
Understood, but that's okay. I mean, if that's what,
And
we're looking to do, then, I think it's in their best interest to at least have that conversation with us now. Again, this is working, but, it's been brought up more than once, so from multiple now commissioners that, I don't believe in salami slicing, like take X percent off of whatever, and we've talked about this previously, but if we're now looking at a couple targeted areas and saying, oh, instead of 6.7, make it 5.7, well, okay, that's significant enough for the schools to come in and say, this is what's happening, and this is why.
Well,
So,
And based on your comment, they're meeting Wednesday night. I think you're gonna be
I'm going,
there.
yeah.
Do we wanna just ask the superintendent, do you wanna discuss this with the board on Wednesday night and have us an answer Thursday? Because I think she is gonna say,
I honestly, I'd rather them come in today.
today? Okay.
I do,
Okay.
to have that conversation, to preface it for Wednesday. I think John or the superintendent is,
Yep.
I'm
good.
prepared enough. And same thing with AgPres.
And if that means, I'm sorry to interrupt,
No.
if that means, they get to us this afternoon session, that's
Yeah.
fine too, I
Yeah.
think, or we
Yep.
break
Yep.
early and do some additional homework on our own, that's fine. I did want to bring up a couple other concerns I have. I'm just not convinced we need to tie up $16 million on PFAS and Piney Run Dam. I'm just not there on that. So I'd like to slide $1 million out of each of those categories to add to our bottom line as well. I'm just not comfortable with those figures that we have in there right now and the costs associated with them.
And we're not going to tell you that we know those are the right numbers. We're just trying to plan for what appears to be in front of us. And we say add to the bottom line, keep in mind that both of those would be one-time changes. So they put money in '24, but it doesn't help with anything else.
I understand. I understand. And
But it doesn't add to the bottom line. I mean, unless
Yeah.
you're,
I thought we had 5 million for PFAS and another 11.
right, but
Piney
it would
Run,
go back
8.
into that 16 million of one-time money that's still hanging out there, right? I mean, or, it's just one-time money, so it doesn't go to help your operating.
For '24, you could.
That's what I said, it would
Right.
help '24,
Yeah.
but not the other years.
What you're saying is correct, but what I've been taught enough is the challenge is you're doing it the one time for '24, but you're masking the concerns that move forward. And if we're committed to looking over the next 5, 6 years, then the use of one-time funds is not suggested. And I think that's more what Ted was getting to. It can be used.
Yeah, and I understand that concern. I guess from my vantage point, we actually don't know what those costs truly will be, though. That's the other variable. We don't know if we've allocated enough or maybe too much. So,
Or maybe not enough.
but that's what I mean. So there's other variables at play. That accounts for a significant amount of our 24 budget.
We started going down the agency issues, and we've handled a handful of them, but we didn't cross off all of them in our decisions. And, some of them are the salary increases, but others are positions and other things. I think there's value in us. It's interesting. I mean, is there value in us reducing the bottom line, or is it putting on board everything we believe are the must-dos, and then look at the bottom line and how we're going to adjust it? Because what I don't want to see is that we get to the end of this routine, the end of this work session, and kind of feel like we're just running out of time and not putting enough attention to all of the requests that are out there. Every request that's out here should be looked at, separately, not just saying, oh, well, it's 245, let's just say, okay, let's just do this. And I've seen that done before, and it's pretty disheartening, because, so we either got to, I think we should look at the agency issues, and either start saying, yeah, this makes sense, let's keep it, out there, or these don't make sense. I mean, that's a suggestion.
If you're going to do that, I said something earlier and didn't get any reaction. Maybe we're out there again. Is there willingness on the board's part to look at fiscal year '29 and say, we're not willing for that to be more out of balance than some number? If we have that as a starting point, and you're going to look at adding other expenditures, at least it's not open-ended. It would say, we have a limit, and we know what it is.
Before we, if it's all right, Ted, walk me through that. We have a budget that is off balance. How does that affect our financial picture over the course of time? How does that affect us this year? Where do we come up with the money that is overbalanced? Does that come out of the surplus?
No, really, the whole point of the plan being out of balance is we don't know how we're going to pay for the services we're committing to. So when we say, there's $16 million, not enough revenue relative to the expenditures in '29, we have no answer for that. Now, it could be that we'll get there and we'll have $16 million worth of surplus, and not that I would argue that we should be fixing it that way, but, I mean, it's possible.
So
But-
let me, yeah, I'm sorry, Ted, please go ahead, I apologize.
And I think that your question is really the big point here. What are we committing to, and what do we think we can actually sustain? And right now, the answer is, we've committed to more than we can sustain.
And that's where I also was bringing up revenue and taxes. Not to say to commit ourselves to that, put on the table to show it where we would then lie if we were to then put more expenses on top of us to provide for some of these agency issues, which a large part of it has to do with salaries and people. So that was that drill. It was, I don't know.
So I know I alluded to, I forget whether it was last Tuesday or Thursday, about whether we could add additional money to ag preservation to try to wrap that program up ahead of time. And I know that this is, a dangerous thing to do, but what if we were to take $2 million out of ag pres from the property taxes and then put $2 million in from the $16 million in surplus that we have? We'd be able to sustain ag pres for a couple of years with that per year, $2 million per year for a couple of years. And then that $2 million that's coming out of property taxes could be added to the bottom line in the situation in which we currently find ourselves. I know it's dangerous. I know it's a difficult thing to do, but if we're looking at, a couple years out and we're looking at trying to move ourselves through here.
Well, it's not necessarily dangerous. It's things to think about there. Now, first, Ag Pres is, the $2.5 million is not an ongoing commitment in the same way that taking on a service or adding a position is. You can end that at any time. So putting one-time money there, that is not a problem by itself. Where it's potentially a problem is if you put one-time money there, free up money on the bottom line, and then that moves us to more spending, because then we are adding to an already existing problem.
That makes sense.
Yeah. In other jurisdictions, they have identified taxes as fire EMS or fire police or fire and something, or
Public
identified it.
safety.
Yeah, safety tax, like there are new costs that have been incurred over time, and, I don't know if that's just packaging and that's just, giving a false sense of, security to the community, that's what those dollars are going towards. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, Montgomery and Frederick both used to have a fire tax. They both rolled that into their property tax. They no longer have a separate
Okay.
tax. If we wanted to explore that, though, that would require General Assembly authority. We don't have the authority to simply implement one.
Okay, so, and we wouldn't be able to earmark part of our property or income tax towards that. We would just identify it here, saying if we're increasing the taxes that we're allowed to increase, we are dedicating that to this, but that's.
Yeah, you can dedicate it, it's just not legally binding.
That's just not legally binding.
And in
Okay,
fact,
I
we
see.
already do that in several ways. You know,
Yeah.
we dedicate part of our income tax to the school capital program. We dedicate part of our property tax to
Right.
Ag Pres. We dedicate part of our property tax to the watershed arrangement.
It's just, to me, there's, again, going back to those big rocks in the jar, education, fire EMS, I mean, these are just
And, you know, when I say it's not
becoming
legally
unfunded
binding, you know,
requirements.
some
No,
people
please.
could look, sorry.
Go ahead, please, I'm sorry.
You know, not legally binding, you know, some people might react, well, sure, you get the money, then you're going to do something else with it. You know, and it
Right.
can be longstanding, like the income tax arrangement we have on school capital goes back to the 90s. We've been doing that for decades. No requirement to do it, but longstanding practice.
And it's as valid as the board, the current board's commitment to doing it.
Yep, it can always be changed.
It can always be changed, yeah.
Our Ag Pres staff is available now. They're not going to be available this afternoon, so do you want to hear from them
Sure.
now?
If that's okay with the group?
As long as they're ready. I mean, I don't want to
Yeah.
put them in a,
Nope, nope,
they're a small, there's only 3 of them, so.
they're fine.
Well, it's not going to be a difficult conversation for them. They're going to say, if you give us less money, we're going to get fewer easements. Don't take away the money.
Well, but we did this also a few years back with fire, EMS, and HR, and the costs, and as, including him into part of the work sessions, because they're the subject matter experts in their fields,
They're on
so.
their way.
Do we have what Ag Pres spent last year?
Well, I don't know exactly what they spent, but they pretty much spend whatever they have.
They used it all.
Yeah, they're, I don't know, do
They
we-
have commitments for, yeah, for all the funding.
Say-
you know,
say
sometimes there are timing issues, but,
Yeah, yeah. but-
They've committed their entire amount? Okay.
yeah, there was, some years ago, there was a time when the commissioners put a big lump of money in, and there was a balance that they were working down for a number of years. But generally speaking, whatever goes in gets used.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ted, to Commissioner Vigliotti's point, you could do that. You know, put in a lump sum of money for Ag Pres that doesn't cause that potential situation by taking the ongoing money out of Ag Pres. It just gives them a one-time infusion of additional cash. Do you see the difference between?
Right, and that was something that I had
Yeah.
suggested last week, and I guess my question therein is that if we do that, and we try to accelerate the program, I guess, do we really have any sense of what the program will look like in the coming years? I mean, do we know that, for example, if we gave them, say, 5 this year, that you know, they might say, well, our cost next year will be 1 or something, 1 million? I mean, do we have any idea how that will translate out, or a projection of how it may translate out?
Right, well, see, I think that's where Ted's cautionary tale, if you reduce the ongoing spending and then spend it someplace else, then what you've done is taken a not really an obligation and, you know, for ongoing expenses, and you've made it an obligation for ongoing expenses, because instead of spending that $1 million that's somewhat discretionary over here, you've now spent that $1 million on something that's not discretionary, and it's going to be, you know, ongoing for forever.
Right, and the suggestion
There's-
was not to spend the money somewhere else, was to try to I guess, even out the bottom line a little more. Like, I'm not suggesting that we take this and spend it somewhere else. I'm just trying to get it off the board.
Yeah,
If
permanent,
that makes sense.
yeah, sort of permanently.
Right, the only way that you can really help the bottom line without potentially creating problems would be to eliminate some portion of the funding. You just say, you're not going to get 2.5 anymore, you're going to get 1.5. Then that is ongoing money for other purposes. The only other thing you can really do is put in a lump of money that is saying, this is additional money beyond whatever we're doing on an ongoing basis. You know, that creates the possibility of getting more easements without complicating other spending.
But if you lower the ongoing, spend it someplace else, and with the intention of raising the ongoing again, you then
Oh, I'm
cause
not
that
talking
problem.
about, I'm not talking about lowering, I'm
Yeah.
talking about replacing the source of the funding, at least for a couple of years to help tide us through.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing, if you do it for a couple of years, after that couple of years.
It's going to have to
you a
revert to
hole.
the,
It's a
right.
cliff.
Where's the money gonna come from?
Yeah, you'd have to do it for a long time.
So we do have,
Yep.
Ag Pres, gentlemen, when you're going up, and just please do not touch Ms. Deb's computer.
She'll hurt you.
She will break fingers, is what I'm told.
I'm not gonna touch it.
Okay. So gentlemen, you've been listening
Yes.
to the work session, and, yeah, there was enough conversation amongst us to say, okay, what is risk, reward, and impact? So, colleagues, gentlemen, what are your,
Well, so I just want to make sure both you gentlemen understand what the discussion's been. I mean, what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think there's been general concern that we don't do anything to hurt your very successful program in the meantime. So that's where we're kind of coming from.
Yeah, appreciate that.
One of the things I want to just point out real quick, and I know Commissioner Vigliotti's had a couple questions last week, and it's come back up today. Could you walk us through the process? I know we're looking at numbers, and we're looking at obviously the 2.5 million of property tax, and obviously we've got 1 million on the board here from AgPres or MALF. Could you run through the process and explain just to everybody how that funding is spent? Because I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but traditionally you all are looking to spend the Royal Legacy money and the MALF funding first as you're working through the process. So you're not starting at that 2.5 in county money. That's later in the process. Am I correct, typically?
It is. I mean, we always try to leverage the state money as best we can. We try to, anybody that fits that program better than our county program, we certainly push them to the state. You know, the county comes in depending on, you know, really the financial situation sometimes of the applicant, you know, but we always try to fill our applications to the state first.
Which I think is a wise way to do it, in that you're not spending Carroll County taxpayers' monies first. We're utilizing additional funds outside of our funds.
That's
In
correct.
that sense, okay.
You know, you know, the biggest thing that we need reserve for is our critical farms. There's been a great demand in the last couple of years. There's a lot of properties changing hands. A lot of the baby boomers, parents are passing away, and the families are, you know, buying those properties from estates and things like that. And we do expect several more of those to come in the near future.
So to kind of, to highlight your processes, if you will, can you give us just a range of how long some of these, I'm going to call them deals, I know they're not deals, but how long some of these deals take? In other words, you've had, from the first phone call to making this happen, you've had 10 years to 1 year? I mean, what kind of range are we talking about and the level of preparation that's
I would
going?
say on average, we're at least 18 months.
18 months? Okay.
That's correct.
So you're the first contact from a potential,
That is correct. And with the state, you know, sometimes that can be close to 3 years.
okay,
It depends on when we make the contact. We always send applications to the state on July 1st. So if someone comes to the table late, that would be well qualified for the state, you know, sometime in July or the summer, then we're going to hold that application till the next July. And then they're going to be a minimum of 18 to 24 months settling with the state.
okay.
That can happen as well with our critical farms, where we're putting money up front to get the deal started.
and July 1st because fiscal year?
Yes, sir.
Interesting.
Yes, sir. So the county, sometimes we can do those deals faster,
Yeah,
you know, because we're not waiting to a certain time.
Right.
We kind of have a rolling application period. And that's the same with Rural Legacy, as long as we have money available from the grant. We can start at any time. So normally, title work can be one of the bigger things that holds up a deal, or subordination by a bank. One of the things that can always hold up the state is that we're only applying once a year. Whether we get the application in, the middle of July, or April or May.
One of the, I guess, comments in question is, the statement is, how proud we are in Carroll County to have done what we've done so far. And sustaining and continuing on with a pretty lofty goal that was set, decades ago. You have, and I know the allocation of dollars have gone kind of up and down over time. Every time the dollars have been allocated through the budget, whether it's this year, next year, or this year, years prior, have all those dollars that have been budgeted been allocated and executed? Or has there been times where you have not had the ability to execute the dollars that have been put in the budget?
I guess maybe
So-
to sum that question up, do you have
Sorry.
more interest in the program than you have funds for the program?
I think right now, today, that is true. We
Which is
just
true,
sent
yeah.
16 applications to the state, and with the increased land values here in the county, we're feeling like we may get 9 offers. And we already have almost 12 farms to send down again this year.
Wow.
So those applicants are people that may also be eligible for the county program where, if they wanted to, because it's up to them, it's a voluntary program, we could switch them over to county and get them paid for. And with all these critical farms, with all, like I said, the estates and different things that people are buying farms, the biggest part and one of the, I guess, more favorable things for the program is that the constituents have confidence that the
Yeah.
program is there and always available.
So with that said, I mean, is there a, if you were given more funds to speed up the process, would that be advantageous?
I think it would be. I think it would lend to the confidence of the applicants to know that the program is there and available.
So if we left the money as is, but kind of, Joe, going back to where you were as far as adding additional one-time funds to it, kind of as a sweetener saying, this is something we want going, we can hit the goals or objectives and goals faster. And that brings a point, do you have specific objectives to every year, or is it whatever comes in, you're taking?
It's a voluntary
Yeah.
program, so, we would always, we would love to do 1,500 or 2,000 acres a year.
Yeah.
We may hit that, we may go over that, we may be nowhere near that, and some of that just has to do with settlement times and things like that, but just to have the ability to do it and the money there to make it, available is always a plus.
So I know there's, I apologize, Chris.
I was just going to add one thing. The other thing to remember about the AgPres program is it's not just about the preservation of the acres and the long-term savings that the county would see as far as increased infrastructure and so on to support development, right? The other aspect, and I think I've mentioned it to several of you, is that there is economic benefit, immediate economic benefit for all the dollars that are put into AgPres. So there's a study that's shown that for every dollar that's put into the community, it generates 1.8 to $2 worth of economic stimulus. So there's that aspect of it too to remember.
So on average, and I know this is difficult to say given, prices of land and whatnot, do you have a general idea of, on average, how many acres get added to the program each year?
Probably right around 1,500 to 2,000.
I don't know, we've been so fortunate to have this program. We've been so fortunate and blessed that we have committed since 1980 to do this, and it's been a staple of Carroll County. And anybody who knows Carroll County knows that. I mean, it's been a fight. Every budget seems to be kind of on the chopping block and figuring out how to sustain it and continue it because of the importance of doing what's right.
One thing I would add to what JP said about the number of acres per year is the low-hanging fruit are continuously disappearing, right? So there's only so many acres that we have in the county, and the price of land is continuously going up.
Yep.
So I don't know that we're going to be able to maintain that 1,500 to 2,000 acres for the next 10, 15 years to reach goals, right? It's.
I was just,
Yeah, it's gonna become ever more difficult to obtain property.
Yeah, I would say on average, 3 or 4 years ago, we were paying about $4,200 to $4,400 per acre. We're closer to $64 to $74 now,
Wow.
so that's,
Yeah, out of the
75%.
target of 22,000 more acres, we have about, 45,000 acres out
I'd
there?
say maybe a
Get-
few more
roughly.
to draw from.
Right, so it
Yes,
is
sir.
becoming a much more difficult, okay.
and so if we're looking at, because we have what, about just shy of 78,000 acres right now, I think is the correct number?
Yeah.
I think
Under
we're
Ag
over
Pres.
78,000.
Over now?
Yeah.
So that gives us roughly 22,000
Out
left.
of 45,000, as opposed to a much larger, I mean, the first 78,000 was easy. The last 22,000 is going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
it's going to get much more.
we know that.
Yeah, it's going to take longer, and
Yeah.
it'll be more expensive.
Exactly.
So if we add some additional funding to it now and try to accelerate the program. 'Cause again, you guys have more interest in the program than funding available to meet the interest in the program.
Yes, sir.
And that goes back to if we left the 2,500 in and then using one-time funds to increase it over the next couple of years and take measurements from there, that may be an option. If we take away from that ongoing money and use one-time funds, then we're going to be back in the same situation.
Right.
So,
So how does everybody feel about that idea about adding some more funding through surplus, through non-recurring revenue to the Ag Pres program? I mean, personally, I have no objection to it. I want to be careful about spending what we have in that surplus, but also at the same time, given the nature of the program, as circumstances evolve and circumstances change, and knowing that we are faced with financial issues as we stand now. I think it's probably wise to try to accelerate the program if we can.
I'm not opposed to the idea. It's probably one of the last things we want to look at. I mean, in terms of the process, not metaphorically,
Yeah.
but just one of the last acts we have of this budget process. But sure, yeah.
I think putting it on the table, just leaving it, yeah, I agree. I don't think we can commit ourselves right now.
I would agree with that as well. I think, given all the variables and everything, I'm not against it. Obviously, I'm a proponent of the program to begin with, but I think, we've got to look at the whole process and balance it. But I'm not against it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, ideas? These two fine gentlemen.
Might not be the last time you're down here. So that's
quite all
the
right.
hint.
So,
So.
Gonna be a little more prepared next time.
Yeah, no,
No,
you
you
were,
were-
you
you
both
were
were. You always
absolutely
both,
prepared.
always are.
Yeah.
So, but just a little.
I have one quick question for you, and I know it's kind of a nebulous question to answer, but, so, obviously, voluntary program, and It does have economic impacts, $1.80, $2 for each dollar generated. There's been conversations, and I've heard this from a number of people, not a lot, but a few people over the last couple of years, that the argument is that AgPres stifles growth in the county. I was just kind of curious what your perspective was on that, because one, it's voluntary, so it's the individual property owner making that choice for themselves to extinguish their property rights in perpetuity forever, and never allowing that to be developed, which obviously, to your point, does affect the future infrastructure and issues that we would be paying for in another sense. So what's your thoughts on that? I mean, I don't really know that I think it extinguishes growth. I think it more maybe balances it out in a sense. Not that growth is bad, not that preservation is bad. They're just two different sides on an issue. I was just curious what your take was on that.
I think the master plan has established great boundaries, between the municipalities and, the ag zones and the places where ag preservation can be. We also have good relationships with the towns, and anytime that we have a farm that's on the edge of a growth area, we always contact the towns, and they seem to always be happy that AgPres is going to be around their town, or on some side of their town, or wherever someone is voluntarily applying to our program. So I think with the good relationships and the fact that we also do some water recharge clauses that can increase water usage in the municipalities, I think we have a good symbiotic relationship with those towns and things. So I really don't feel like, although we are a purchase of development right and extinguishing them program, I think we are creating a county in which people want to live. So I really don't feel like we're inhibiting, we're cooperating with the towns.
I would agree with what JP said, is that it's really a function of the master plan. It's the decision that was made going back to the late 70s and so on of what we want Carroll County to be. And these programs like the AgPres program and the designated growth areas and so on, that charted the path. Now, the path can be adjusted. You all can adjust that path through the master plan process and so on, but that's the path that we're on. And I don't think there are complaints as far as the direction that we've gone.
Yeah, and Chris, I agree. JP, I absolutely agree. And you both know my feeling about the Freedom Growth Area, and to take a look on the value of properties that may fit into preservation, and for landowners that want to take advantage of preservation. The whole idea is to be contiguous with other properties and to really package it, but I believe there are areas that could be, especially those that border both Commissioner Guerin's, district and District 5, right in that area, there may be properties that we're going to want to take a look at and kind of open up that aperture. Or at least that's what my thoughts are, because again, it's a lofty goal that we are 3/4 of the way there above, and this is a great opportunity. That's what makes Carroll County, just another example. So
I agree with you, Commissioner. I think that if we are, we should open up other areas to the potentiality for this. And I think also at the same time, I know I'd mentioned last week or the week before, and also during the solar moratorium discussion, about whether or not lowering the number of acres required to enter into the ag preservation program might not also be beneficial. I mean, obviously the right soil type and everything, but I did speak to, for example, one property owner who decided to go the way of solar because they just missed the threshold to qualify for the AgPres program, and they would have preferred to have gone into AgPres and going the route of solar. So, I think that's probably a worthy thing for us to look at.
And those types of requirements are something that we always have in the back of our head as we're looking at the program. At this point, as JP's mentioned, we have more demand than we have supply. If it were flipped, then we would be looking at, okay, what kind of adjustments would make sense?
Right.
Lowering the acreage thresholds and so on. But every property that we bring in, there's a cost associated with staff and processing and so on. So we want to focus on those larger properties because there's more bang for the buck. And while we have this greater demand, that's how we're focusing the program. But you're absolutely right. If demand decreases, but we're not getting to where we need to, we would want to look at some of those requirements and start opening the program up to how can we continue with the goals, to meet the goals.
Well, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. I guess the other thing, too, is that even if we did, say, lower the threshold, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who applied would have to be accepted, correct? I mean, you could make a judgment call and say, well, right now, the policy or the focus is on, properties with X number of acres versus Y number of acres. But that would also give people, I guess, the assurance or the reassurance that, in the future, there's that consideration, that there's that possibility that they could enter into the program.
Commissioners, can I suggest that this might be a conversation for another time? 'Cause this is not going to advance what you're trying to do here today.
Well, I don't disagree, but there is a balance of what we are working to accomplish today, and for all of us to understand and grasp the importance of preservation and what the character of Carroll County is to be, be. And I agree, sometimes we can go down rabbit holes, but I do appreciate the conversation that you all have brought forward. If there's any closing comments.
Yeah, can I just mention one thing quickly? Commissioner, we do have some pretty low acreage requirements depending on the program. The biggest part is that you're adding on to a larger parcel and creating these big areas of preservation. We sent a 10-acre parcel down to Mouth last year. We have a 12-acre parcel we're looking to do up in Kemar. That is what we call a donut hole. Everything around it is preserved. It's an original parcel from 1964. It has its off conveyances. It has other lot rights. So we can accept smaller parcels normally if they're contiguous to something else. Rural Legacy will allow us to do smaller parcels as well. It just depends on the funding, that we have through Department of Natural Resources. So we can do some relatively small parcels, and also in the county we do add-ons. A farmer that wants to buy 20 acres next door, we can consolidate that parcel into his. So we do have avenues for doing rather small parcels, if it fits.
Yep, thank you very much. And I promise I was not trying to take us down a
Nope.
rabbit hole. I'm just
Nope.
trying to build
Nope.
up the
Nope.
case a little bit more
It's
for
good.
accelerating the program.
That's right.
I promise, Ted, there was a purpose to my questions.
So, is there any other comments on this? Really appreciate gentlemen coming down, as I would expect you would, so, thanks.
Thank you.
As far as schools, we do have the slide for
I'll be right back, keep going.
for the schools. We can use that.
Thank you, guys.
And/or, in addition to that, bring the schools here. That's our druthers. The challenge with just looking at the slide, again, it's going to be in our own judgment what is important and what's not, as opposed to the expertise that the schools have shared with us already.
But they're not going to share that with you today.
They did twice already, and if somebody has question on that, my challenge is, I don't want to take something away that, may be the highest priority of that list, which is no all number one priority.
But you're not going to be making that choice anyway. You're not going to say what's not going to be what's not going to be funded.
But we don't know the cost associated with each one of those. I know, and we can back off that for a bit, but we got to move, you're right, we got to move forward. And, you know, if we look at the agency issues, what are any of the thoughts on agency issues, on whether we want to move forward with them or start, you know, putting them off to the side?
Before you leave Ag Pres, just a couple comments. You know, everything we're talking about here is a balancing of programs and spending. Ag Pres is no different. Sometimes it gets talked about like it's some special animal, but it's the same thing. How much are we going to spend to accomplish what? And we can invite a long list of people in here and say, if we gave you more money, could you accomplish more? And they would say yes, and they would have good arguments for doing it. So and I'm not arguing for what to do or not do for Ag Pres. I'm arguing against making it its own thing like it is. It's not a decision just like every other decision we have to make. And, you know, Chris talked about the economic benefit. I always get worried when people start talking about that, and Ag Pres is not the only place we hear it. We have lots of people who come in and say, every dollar you spend will generate this. Even if we buy the numbers, and I always am skeptical, but even if we buy the numbers, just keep in mind that that's not adding back revenue that you get to spend on something. It's a much larger measure of economic activity in the county. So that dollar you're spending is a dollar you're spending. It's not money that you're making.
And I agree with that. I think Ag Pres is wonderful. I think our schools are wonderful. I think our sheriff's wonderful. I think our firefighters are wonderful. I think the employees in this building are wonderful, but we're still out $6 million.
Right.
And I still think there's a couple of these agencies at the top of the page. Thursday, I said about cutting those in half. I trimmed it down a little bit more, but I'm still adding $991,000. I'm still skeptical of adding 2 more EMS positions when they're getting so many, and that's only $160,000. But I think we got to look at taking 1% off salaries. I think we got to look at taking $1 million off schools and $1 million off Ag Pres of ongoing money. Add in some of these, and then maybe look back at some of the other stuff, you know, we were adding early, but we haven't really cut anything of significance
Right,
since we've been talking about this.
That's right,
And
that's where I wanted.
that's what we're here for, and you know, and I agree with, you know, you could say, put another $1 million into rec and parks, and with all the volunteers, we get 5 times our money. Well, that's okay if you got another $1 million. I just,
No, you're making perfect sense.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. I looked down at my watch at 9:30, and I think we had come up with, in theory, roughly about $6 million that we were willing to take a look at to cut. That's what we need to be doing right now. So I think we're on the right track, and we got to keep going. I mean, in terms of opportunity cost, I understand we still need to take a look at some of the agency issues, but we still have some much bigger figures we can probably spend time on. I know it's a debate as to what the right way to go about that is.
Yeah.
Well, you'd also made some suggestions, Commissioner Guerin, that we haven't thrown up yet, the 1 million out of PFAS, the 1 million out of the Board of Ed, and the 1 million out of Piney Run, so we, you know.
Exactly, yeah, no, thanks, Ms. Wyndham. That's exactly right, too. I mean, you add those in, and I feel like we're getting closer to where we might need to be.
Question 2, and Commissioner Guerin, maybe you can help me out with this. I'm trying to remember late last week, you had a couple questions you had put forward, and I don't know, did we ever get answers specifically to what those topics were? And I don't remember specifically what those were, but I just want to mention that.
They were those three things
Those
you
three
just
things? Okay.
mentioned. And then there was something, I mentioned it yesterday, Ted, you and I had talked about it. There was a fourth thing that was more ongoing. Do you remember?
Not so far.
No, I had mentioned some public works issues and some things in the CIP.
Yeah, there were these three one-time things, and then there was something.
Maybe it was the
ongoing.
public works issues you were,
It was the public works
Okay.
issues I had mentioned.
I remember the
And then I know
PFAS and
Commissioner
the
Kyler had, I think we had referenced the 5.5 recommended salary increases back last week as well.
Yeah. And a 5.5 salary increase is both tied to COLA and to merit, correct?
Yes.
2% COLA, 3.5% merit. Or is it flipped?
As it stands right now, 3.55 would be the COLA.
Okay, 3.5 and 2% to merit.
what was the previous COLA the year before, just out of curiosity?
The same.
The same? Okay.
So if we were to take any percent off, we'd be taking off the merit, which would be up to 2% to maintaining just COLA.
Well, we can package it anyway.
Right. But I mean, right, okay.
So do you want to see Commissioner Garen's ideas?
With the, yeah.
Trying to go back to
I
those
know,
for you.
I know, I appreciate it.
People
I know
keep
you're-
getting off that subject.
I know, you're trying to keep things going.
Yeah, no.
We all appreciate it.
No problem. We just, we try not to get things lost, that's all.
And
1%?
Thank you.
Is that what you said, 1%?
I thought we were looking at taking it down to
That's what Commissioner Kyler said.
the increases. Right now, we're at 5.5.
What's that?
What was the number you were looking at on the increases?
I'm sorry.
The number you were looking at potentially,
Well, I just said if we took off 1%, that's $568,000.
sure.
But, and then I still think we need to look at some of the agency stuff.
Was the Board of Ed was the 1 million Board of Ed and then $1 million from AgPres each year, too?
So you want to take $1 million from Ag Pres?
I don't know. I know it was
I'm
something that
no,
was
no,
talked
I'm-
about
I'm-
earlier.
I apologize, Deb, I'm not asking you.
Well, again,
Commissioner
I know
Kyler.
we had talked about this before. We could take 1 million out of Ag Pres and then plug in $1 million from the surplus. And I know that's dangerous, and I know that there's
Yeah.
issues over the course of time, but again, if it gets us through the next couple of years,
And yes, that's your choice to make, but that's why, or that's at least part of why we're in the position we have. You know, every time we say, let's get through the next couple of years, what we're doing is building the problem after that.
No, I agree with Ted on that statement. I guess my only question, Commissioner Vigliotti, was, and correct me if I'm wrong, earlier you were talking about putting additional funds into AgPres. So if we pull that $1 million and then pull $1 million out of the other funds Ted's talking about, we're really basically back to that number. I know we're moving money around, but we're not really adding additional in the sense of it being above and beyond. Not that I'm suggesting we should do that or shouldn't do that. I'm just making the comment.
I think AgPres is great. It's been great. It'll continue to be great. I think when we're teetering on some of us talking about that we're, in the near future, we need to raise taxes, I'm just not sure. As a taxpayer, there are things, safety, schools, landfills, that are quality of life, and I can be sold on why maybe
Right.
that has to increase. I'm not sure I'm willing to pay more taxes to help AgPres.
And I'm not suggesting we should or we shouldn't, I'm just commenting.
I know. I'm just saying, it's, I understand, and it's.
And we have been, you're right.
I don't think in this book, we have anything that's not a good thing to do for Carroll County, but we can't do them all.
Well, and I just want to make one point, and I agree with what you're saying there. Just so everybody's on the same page, obviously you're showing up on the board right now. Where was it? I think we're taking hypothetically taking $1 million back out of the BOE. That would put it at what, 5.7 million?
Yes.
So the 5.7 plus the current funding would create the new maintenance of effort, which means next year's maintenance of effort would be that number. So I'm just pointing that out. I'm not saying I'm for that. I'm not saying I'm against that. But our new number would be that number then, going forward.
So two things. One, it'd be interesting to know what you're for or against. And then second is, with the blueprint that is looming in front of us, the biggest challenge is that's going to hit us upside the head. And, everything that is, telling us right now is that the state is saying, these will be your requirements, and oh, by the way, you're going to pay for them. And that's going to be a FY 25, 26, cliff. That's why I was sticking with that 6.7 or whatever number they were providing, because it would at least get us to a starting point for the blueprint. And right now, I just feel like it's going to be more of a cliff, and we're just going to hit the same issues next year. And that bothers me. It was rough the last couple of years. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. And we still haven't even adjusted or touched this stuff as far as agency issues, which are in front of us. So, but
And I don't disagree with you. I think and to your point, it is a challenge with Blueprint on the horizon. But we're doing the heavy lifting this year, but we're going to have to do even more heavy lifting, as we all know, the following year. You want to look at some things I'm definitely for or against. Commissioner Garrett wants to take $1 million out of PFAS. I can support that. I can take $1 million out of the dam. I think there's a number of projects we're looking at that if we want to cut those, I could see us temporarily cutting those. I don't remember which you and I had spoken earlier, and I don't have that list in front of me. I know you do. If we need to cut some projects temporarily, I can see that.
But are those capital projects or are they ongoing?
So here's an example. I'm going through the CIP over the weekend. Actually, not over the weekend, it was yesterday, but anyway. But, we're looking at, I'm trying to understand. I asked the question, I think on Thursday, was it last Thursday, of how these public work projects, the genesis of them and how they get onto the radar, but just in, the Georgetown Boulevard extension, the Clean Mill slope repair, the Monroe Avenue extension, the Slacks Road improvements, those alone are almost $2 million for this fiscal year.
So each one of those been through the master plan, and Georgetown is tied, one, that turn is extremely dangerous and it has to be adjusted. So a circle was designed, and it was going to feed into the Beatty property, which was being sold at that time, and still as a very large, there's 2 very large parcels in the Freedom District, and only 3 or 4 left around. And that would be a feeder into that large parcel. So that was the Georgetown. Slacks Road, right now it's A&E, and that is having to do with, there's 170, give or take, $1 million more, it'll probably be about $200 million veterans home that's being built on the property on the east side of Slacks Road, just down from the American Legion. Slacks Road is, again, very dangerous, and if we don't make a commitment to adjust Slacks Road, then we're not going to get the $170 million project, which will also have about 180 workforce in the county of nurses and administration. Monroe is an interesting one because that's just been on the plan for quite some time to be connected. And Clee Mill is something separate that has to do with a repair that has to be done. But, yeah, I mean, that's what those roads are. So that's the history of the roads, and that's the significance of the impact of those roads. If I was to, prioritize, it'd be Georgetown and Slacks would be the highest priority. One, Georgetown, there's too many accidents that happen there, and putting a circle there would allow for, going into a property that's going to be developed. And Slacks, because of our commitment to the state and our veterans, that I think is, Yeah.
I don't know all the details on the Clees Mill project. But,
Yeah.
I would be very cautious about removing that without knowing more.
Yeah,
It
and-
sounds
and-
like a safety thing, like the hills falling
Right.
down into the roadway. So it may not be something that we
Yeah,
have much of a choice on.
Yeah, and
I just
again,
don't know Clees Mill. I mean, I know Clees Mill, but I don't know the project
driven,
itself.
I mean, I drive by it occasionally, and I wouldn't mind getting more information on that, because I know we're talking about a hill, the hill facing 26 and the hill facing Cleemel. It's probably one of those roads we're discussing. But, and again, I wasn't trying
Yeah.
to single in on any specific area or district or anything of the sorts, but I mean, just looking at the costs associated with some of those projects alone, and then they just go up in FY '25. Georgetown Boulevard for FY '25, we've got a $2 million price tag, so, if we're trying to make hard decisions on what we want to do this year or next,
That's just really the way the CIP works, when they expect the funding to occur.
but
Yeah.
once you start, you can't
Yep.
stop, right?
Yep.
So-
Yep. So that's sort of why the CIP is really chunky that way. It goes up and down a lot because you have some years where you're doing a more expensive portion of a project than other years.
In the past, the whole Charles Carroll Community Center and how that was developed was a project in a similar sense, that we looked at projects, not necessarily the ongoing funds. Not comparing one to the other, but that's was the rationale for Georgetown and especially for Slacks. And the challenge with Slacks is it's just, again, it can be a dangerous road if there's ingress, egress onto the veterans home. It'd be and that's a long-term project, probably going to get done by FY '27, when all's said and done. So, and the funding is going into the BPW for the veterans home in a couple months. So, that's.
When do you, getting off topic though, so
Yeah.
when do you think that actually might be done? The
Probably FY
if you had
'27,
to guess?
if I was to
FY27?
guess. And I apologize, Ted, getting off topic, but we did, Commissioner Collin and I just had a conversation with the secretary, gave him the timeline, and he's going to the Board of Public Works, I think, in 2 months or something, and it's for the architecture engineering. And then FY '24 in the spring could be, so next spring, could be shovels in the ground. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, sorry.
Apologize about that.
Sorry, we just received word that the Clees Mill project is a must-do, or else we'd have to
Okay,
close the road.
that's what I thought. We're talking about slopes and
Yeah.
slides and mud.
So that one is in a different, I would say, category compared to.
Certainly seems like it, yeah, thanks.
So Commissioner Garin, why, and if I'm catching you off guard here, I apologize, why $1 million versus something more off of PFAS and Piney Run? For taking it out, why not 1.5 versus one?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't.
Right.
Because I'm just doing some rough math here. So if we took all of those, right, we add $1 million out of AgPres, that puts us at about 4.5. But if PFAS and Piney Run were 1.5 each, that would give us roughly 5.5. And out of the 6.6 that we're in the hole right now, we'd be left with 1.1 million. And that would take us back to the discussion that Commissioner Rothstein wants to have about the agency requests.
Sure.
What
That's one
is-
way to get there.
Yeah.
I think we also need to have a continued discussion about the 6.7 million for BOE and what we want to do with that number. I think we all, I mean, just for the record, we all agreed to add that 6.7 to the recommended budget for a reason.
Right.
But we are facing some hard decisions,
Right. Well, now it's 5.7 with that.
so.
So, okay.
So, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I missed, what do we do? I apologize, I wasn't,
We're down to minus 4 million
with those that we have
with
up there.
those that we've made adjustments to. Or minus 3.
Minus 3,
Is that 2.9?
yes.
Okay, I apologize, minus 3.
So if we add $1 million from AgPres, if we take $1 million out of AgPres,
Every year or 1 year?
every year, and if we make PFAS and PR dam 1.5 instead of 1,
These are the magic fingers of Deb that you get to witness.
that leaves us at, where am I looking? Oh, that
We're-
leaves us at
Negative $1 million.
And my,
$1 million.
my agency stuff adds up to 991.
Are you serious?
Yes.
All right, what's,
That's
all
fine.
right, Commissioner Collins, what do you got?
Well,
991 in addition or 991?
addition.
Yes, then we'd be.
Yeah,
down
that's why I
2
say
million.
it's coincidence,
Oh, I
but
thought it was-
what I said
Never
was
mind.
No,
Carroll
no, it's
Community
all good.
College, cut it in half. Public Library, cut it in half.
I apologize, do you want to capture this? Do you want this captured on the spreadsheet?
Oh, I don't
No, I
care.
think it's a good idea. I just, if you do, let Deb know specifically, and I don't want to say slow down too much because she's pretty quick, but
Oh,
sure
okay.
she's
No,
keeping up. So, yeah, because I think it's a good
Cut the
idea.
direct fund, the funding we already have in the recommended?
no.
Okay.
The sheet we have on agency,
Oh, okay,
Add.
add,
Right.
yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Because I think some of these were the ones that did not get the increase last year, and I think we need to look at them even harder now that we took 1% out.
Well,
okay.
here,
Which ones?
So he's starting on
Region
top with the community college.
So, yeah, I said community college, cut it in half.
Their request, so from 245 to 122.5.
Yep. The public library, same thing, which I think will still hopefully help them out of their minimum wage issue. The extra positions of the,
Well, she's,
I apologize, Kenny. Are you going all the way down to the state's attorneys on this? Are you going all the way
Yep.
down? So Deb, if you can capture everything down to the state's attorney, put it
In half.
below, further down, I think.
I was looking at the top 7 lines.
Yeah,
on that page.
exactly. That's what I'm saying, is take the top 7 lines, put them down, so then you can adjust them.
Top 7 lines into what?
well, they're
Well,
different.
I was saying, putting them in a place where then you can make your adjustments, because that's what he's talking off of.
Oh, he wants them funded in half, right?
Yes,
All right, so I already have them calculated in half. Is that what you're looking for, right there? This is community college, half of what they're asking for.
Yep, half.
Library,
Yeah,
half
yep.
of what they're asking for.
yeah.
Yep,
Courts, half. If I do this, it'll show you.
yes.
Fund half. And then the state's attorney funding half.
But that's only 4,
Yes,
isn't there more?
yes, which meant
Oh, you don't have
not the
the,
extra positions at the library and.
What about the
not
sheriff?
stipend or increase for the sheriff.
so not the stipend for the sheriff.
That's what I had for
Yeah,
now.
that's all right. Just, what about the sheriff's salary increase? Did you have that or not? Commissioner Powell, did you have the sheriff's?
I did not.
So, okay, okay. I just want to make sure what you're asking for is what is being put up there. Okay.
It's 989,900.
Thought it was
Yeah.
close.
So we're back up to 2 million in the hole.
Does this still include?
Now, how did that
It probably
happen?
doesn't, because you're
What's that?
just that good. This doesn't include the full, the salary
were
increases that were
991
suggested
in the hole.
previously. for
And now
those.
you added all
We
this,
added
now we're,
that back,
Like they
yes.
had it
Yeah, now
earlier,
we're
they
2
had a
million
state's
in the
So
attorney.
we need to
now we
figure
gotta
out 2
figure out
million
how
in
to,
cuts, I think.
okay,
Right, but we don't also have, I mean, they'd already, the
okay.
board had already did a mini vote on,
Yeah, I
Money
can't,
for-
I can't remember if we did that or not. That's a good question.
I just thought we should
So
look.
we were
just
all
make-
over the place.
What was
I
the
know.
question?
See, we
the-
have the state's attorney's office.
The 5.5
Okay.
recommended, did we
No, those
reduce
are
it down to
positions.
4.5
Those are
like we
positions.
mentioned?
But I do
I
think,
thought you did.
I do think Commissioner Kyler
Didn't you?
suggested taking the positions away.
Yeah, the 1%.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
And then,
Mike, what about those positions with E ESAC?
So,
Where was it?
I'm willing to discuss those. We're funding 3 positions with the state's attorney's office, and
I thought
think
we're
it's-
funding 2.
3.
3, and there was a 4th one in question. I think it was a
Oh,
security
I
officer.
apologize, yeah.
And-
Yeah,
We, I think it's fair to say we've been exposed to what those positions do, but they're relatively new for the board to look at. I've been talking about the data analyst and the EMS billing for quite a while now. The issue is this, I think the requirement's there. I think that the requirement is going to be there in FY '24. If it's not there on July 1st, it will show up. So at some point, if we decide to take those out, I'm going to be having the discussion with this board about finding the money to fund those positions, because I truly believe that requirement is there at some point in
I
FY
agree.
'24.
and I agree that the requirement, I don't know that it'll be there in '24, but I think it's coming, but I think there's been other staff added that I think can pick this up.
I don't.
I mean, in terms of staff, I mean, we're talking about lieutenants and some other things that aren't going to be doing those jobs.
Right.
So I don't know. And
Yeah.
again, I mean, has the state's attorney's office made their case strongly for those 3 positions as well as I've tried to make it for Department of Fire and EMS? I don't
And
know.
So,
the state's attorney's office, someplace was the security person, which I don't
yeah.
think we should do now
I
either.
think the security,
Yeah, that
we
was-
shouldn't have to do, but the ERUs are part of the analysts for the body-worn cameras and getting that whole
Oh, no, I
package. So,
understand.
so that, I
Yep.
think, is necessary. I do believe that the data analyst is very important for fire EMS. This has been an ongoing issue that I've been aware of for the last 4+ years, because they freaking pencil and, thank goodness we have Eddie Ruck doing a lot of this, but there's no formal process to do the planning and preparation, that the data analyst would provide. Yeah, so I think that fire EMS does not have the tools necessary without the data analyst, so.
I will be the first person to identify that there's no need there, and that maybe we're looking at a situation where we're contracting out that kind of work or something like that. I completely understand how there is some skepticism about that. As far as the EMS billing position goes, there is one person doing that right now, so that concerns me as well. And I understand that work for the second person may not be there on, April 11th, but I truly believe that that need will be there at some point. So I don't know, how dynamic can we be in terms of positions that we think we're going to need in FY '24, but we really don't want to spend the money right now? I don't know. This is my first time doing this. So,
have the reserve for contingencies, so you always have a path during the year if you want it. But if the board is committed to adding the position, whether we add it in '24 or add it in '25 is not that
Right.
important.
I believe it should be added, because we're trying to design a state-of-the-art processes, and I can't speak nearly as much as billing, I just don't know, but I can speak about the data analyst position. I think they've made a strong argument for that. I haven't been a part of ESAC for a while, but
I mean, Commissioner Rothstein, I appreciate you saying that. We have similar backgrounds in that regard. Again, if it's something we want to take off the board right now, I can promise you, I will be bringing it up
Right.
again. I mean, that's
No,
not just my role in the ESAC,
I
but I'm just
understand.
convinced that those positions, so if we decide we want to make that decision now, if the majority of the board is having second thoughts about the here and now on that, it's coming back. I can assure you.
Oh, I think to both your point, Commissioner Rothstein's, I have to agree with both of you. I think it's very important, and, we could remove it, but to remove it just to bring it back, I think is kind of
Yeah.
a moot point. I
waste.
think we leave it and we keep working.
If we get down to it, I'm willing to give, I mean, I know we have to give and take right now. We're at the point now where we're all giving a little.
One thing that boards have done before, and I don't know if this is if it sounds like there may be some thought that the positions, those two positions might not be needed on July 2nd. If that's a thought, then you can fund them for a half of the year or a quarter of the year in FY #24, and then ongoing from there. And that way, they're funded on an ongoing basis, but the board just don't feel they're needed until December. Just a thought that's happened before. It helps just a little,
Yeah.
but
Okay, appreciate it. We can put an asterisk
Yeah.
by those two, and
Yeah, because that makes sense to me it would be half for '24 and then full for the rest.
one thing we haven't talked about, that we talked about the salaries and making them half. Soil Conservation is requesting an increase of $88,900 FY '24 for an ongoing increase. And they came to us for the bonus, we said no. They are a critical part of our process and the work that they do. But if we're looking at salary increases amongst the others, like we did, should this also be considered?
Well, I think you make a valid point of them being critical, and if I'm not mistaken, Ted, if one of you guys want to hold me honest on this one, this department had some concerns of aging employees, was, if I remember correctly, what they had mentioned, not unlike many others, but I think that's 6, I believe, in that department, roughly?
I think that's right.
I mean, I'd agree with Commissioner Rothstein on that one. I think that one's we really need to take a look at, as it is significant.
And I would maybe suggest cutting it in half. A 10% plus longevity isn't what anybody else is getting,
Correct. That's correct.
but they
So-
should get something.
so
And then
you're saying-
we also put the health department on hold.
So if we were to cut that in half, the health department has to do with positions.
Yes.
And has to do with the environmental specifically. Environmental business unit, department, whatever it is.
And that was a stipend, correct?
Annual stipends, yeah, that's right, because they shared with us the training without the ability to retain the workforce in environment, because they're being pilfered by other jurisdictions. That was their concerns. So they're looking for stipend.
Can Can you remind me, did the health department, are there increases for the health department in the recommended? There are,
Not from us.
from us.
State?
They're state employees.
Okay.
Although it's a weird setup, how it gets funded, but probably not worth getting into now. But we are not directly funding a salary increase for them. We do provide funding, though, that could in theory be used that way.
So that's why this looks the way it does. They came to us for stipends, because it's just different streams of money, if you
They
will.
can't change the salaries of those people, so this is an alternate path to getting them some compensation.
That's right, it was that MS, whatever,
Right.
that form, they have, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that.
Because they mentioned Howard and Baltimore County and others that are just pulling them away. And unfortunately, we've heard that often about being a training ground for talent and then pulled away. So I would like to see the stipends put in place for the environmental health staff. That always seems to be one of the most critical areas within the health department that's being used across the county. And, you know, if they're not being able to sustain their workforce, we got a problem.
And then next to that, we're showing the Historical Society, but
Yes. Commissioner Guerin and I are meeting with them this week. Commissioner Guerin and I are going to meet with them this week.
can't they fundraise and do that?
That would be my hope. I'm not trying to be smart when I say it that way. If everybody would be okay with it, I'd like to just leave that in as a placeholder till we have that conversation, and then we can come back and, I mean, I realize, you know, in comparison to the 160 for the health department, it's, and I don't mean to use the word only, but it's 20,000.
Oh, I know.
But still, to your point, it's 20,000 over 3 years, which is still, no matter how we look at it, it's still 60,000 out of the
Right.
budget. So if we, for
And-
just temporarily.
Yeah, and I agree, because one of the challenges, we have a mixture of nonprofits
Yep.
and
Yep.
state and county, so, you know, just because it's one line below or above, gets our eyes looking at it, so, but we have to keep them separate. I think putting a stipend in for the health department is important because of the concerns we have with environmental health.
Are we setting any kind of precedence by doing that, or have we done that before, or what's,
We have not done this before. Years ago, we made an extra payment to the director of the health department for a number of years. That stopped again some years ago. Of course, like anything, you know, once you do it, it makes it easier for somebody else to ask for something.
And if their salaries principally come from the state,
Correct.
we're supplementing a state salary that already contains raises in it.
Correct.
Am I correct? Okay. So then, I don't mind making the argument, why would we include a raise on top of a raise from the state?
Because they're not able to keep the employees from going from one jurisdiction to another. And that's what's been happening.
or going into private?
Or we're going into private after being trained.
And I understand that. But the reality is that I think probably all of our agencies and all of our departments have that issue to some degree, that you know, I mean, again, even if we were paying very well, somebody else would be paying better. And then just, you know, it is human nature to follow, you know, the best course available.
There are certain positions, I believe, like this, that become not a commodity, but a must, to have the talent in place. And we've talked about this, engineers, stormwater management is critical for
Yeah.
our success in our county. If we don't have the right talent maintained in the workplace, then we're not going to get the results we want. And the discussion that the health department had with us was that they could not sustain the workforce within environmental health. Everything else, they seem to be, hey, we're able to do these things that's expected of us, but we're not able to do this for the county. They are state employees. We're not going to convince the state to raise their salaries. So they came up with this thought of putting a stipend to keep them in place. I mean, it's a good idea, but like Ted and all of us are continuing to now say, everything's a good idea, so which good idea is not going to get onto the plate? I think this is important enough that we either put the stipend in place, or if we are looking at, they came up with a stipend, but maybe it should be partial to that.
You may be following Commissioner Tyler's idea and cutting it in half?
Possibly. I mean, if that's, it's one of those positions I believe that, or one of those actions I believe it warrants us to do something.
Process-wise, just want to point out, Deb's been capturing the things we're talking about here, but the board hasn't actually been voting on
Right,
any
right.
action. So at some
Right.
point, something will have to happen
Yep.
to say, leave it, or we'll
Yep.
be unwinding again.
So,
Well, and I would have to agree with Commissioner Rothstein. I'll echo his points of them being important. There's no question of that. I mean, obviously, we're now looking at two different numbers, half of that number. I think the only thing, and Commissioner Kyler kind of said this a minute ago, I think we have to be fully prepared, as we all know this will happen, but I'm just going to make the point. If we're looking at stipends, and that seems to be the new way, we're going to see this become a consistent moving forward from various groups, whether it be the health department, it could be the state's attorney's office, it could be whoever. And I'm not singling those groups out, I'm just using those as examples. But I think we need to be prepared and mindful that, yes, we do have our main concerns of safety, security, and education, but, we're going to be setting this precedent, which I'm not against it, but we better be prepared for what's coming next. Because this will be the new move. Well, you don't want to give us massive salary increases? How about a stipend? Like I said, I'm not against the idea, I just want to point that out.
there's 3 state agencies, social services, which really isn't asking for anything, Board of Elections, and Health Department, that we really focus attention on. Board of Elections is asking for 3 separate things. One is, I think a stipend or whatever for their board, increase in the judges, and then continuing education. We all agree that the Board of Elections has a critical role, especially coming up in the in the 24 elections. And we also all, I believe, agree that there's going to be a lot more rules put on them in the 24 elections, whether we like that or not. And I think most of us don't, but that's regardless. They still have to own up to those commitments. So the question is, can they do it without the increases for the judges and the continuing education? I don't think the continuing education gives them a leg up on the calendar year 24. Again, I'm not the expert of the election board. I mean, Katie Berry is, but she's putting $20,000 in ongoing for continuing education. That could be something we take off. And then if we look at the Board of Elections, again, stipend, Ted, what is that recommended budget includes 68,000 increase, 22%? Can you explain that?
Yes, the recommendation already includes an increase for this purpose. She's requesting a greater increase.
So So we already have an increase of 68,000, and she's requesting 22% above that, which is the 29,000.
Yes.
That was for the election judges?
Yeah.
Question, and I don't know if anybody has the answer from this. Obviously, Sine Die was yesterday. Does anybody know what was decided on the Board of Elections side with salary increases in Annapolis? I don't have that in front of me. I wasn't sure if anybody was aware of that, because there was a bill in front of Annapolis that they would have put that on us regardless.
There were quite a few bills that we probably need to know the status of before we're done this week.
They said that bill passed.
Okay.
Bill passed? Okay.
So then does that not then make that a moot point of us having any conversation on that?
Yeah, I'm answering with very little information here,
Fair enough.
but apparently it is a greater increase than what they're asking for here.
Okay, so we're locked in by that, by Annapolis then at this point, so that's a moot point even having that conversation. And I'll just ask this question since we're on this topic. We're not doing official votes, obviously, right now, or any type of vote right now. We voted on these three issues last week, unless we want to go back and re-vote on that. And then I guess my question would be this: we brought in AgPres because nobody knows AgPres better than AgPres. Not that I want to bring in everybody, but if we want to have a discussion on Board of Elections, do we ask Catherine Berry to give us her insight, just as we did AgPres? I'm just putting it out there because we are in this room are just going to make assumptions one way or another. We're not them. We're
Well,
not doing the job.
She came in to talk to us already about these positions. And those that she's requesting. So, I mean, I know what you're saying, I don't think there's gonna be more to it than that. I think the AgPres, it's just so complicated that we didn't, they didn't come to us,
Yeah.
For those numbers. But I think, so going back to that legislation, it's a moot point on what we put in there for the salary stipend increase?
That's what it sounds like. Again, I did not know about this until just now, but if it's in legislation, then we don't have any choice.
But the continuing education, we do. I'd recommend taking that out.
Yeah. So what you're saying is leave in the board member
Yeah.
stipend, take the
Yeah.
other two out.
Yeah.
And I'm,
No, I apologize. The challenge is we don't know what the board election judge stipend increase now is. I know what they're asking for.
I don't know, but I think
Right.
we do know. I think
Okay,
and we will take care of that.
Yeah.
If legislation changes
Right.
things, then
Right.
we'll put it in, and next one of these, it'll be, here's what
Okay.
changed.
So we could take those two out, and you'll just add in,
Yes.
Okay.
And I just want to remind, if we talk about taking things out, we're not taking anything out.
yeah,
We're choosing
we're just
not
not
to put
adding
it
it.
in.
Yes, we're
Right.
not adding it.
so that would be my recommendation is, I guess like you just said, is leaving the board member stipend in and taking the education and the election judge stipend increase out, because that's gonna change regardless.
I agree.
Any thoughts on that?
I'm okay with taking them out, especially if the state's going to dictate what we have to do with them anyways. I'm sorry, Kenny, I was trying to get to my stuff, sorry.
I'm taking over the whole, sorry.
No, no worries, no worries.
I got you.
I think what may be a good thing right now is we look at the decisions that we've been making this morning and either agree or disagree to them.
I'm sorry,
I'm saying I think a good point right now would look at the decisions that we've made this morning and for us to agree or disagree in leaving them and then take a break. Is that, I mean,
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we agree to do all the changes we've discussed here this morning. No, I mean,
No,
I'm
I-
serious.
I
I
hear
think,
you.
if you want to re-summarize them for everybody,
No.
but I think put them in. Again,
Okay,
we're not done yet,
no.
so they're not for permanent, but I think it was good discussion, and I think they all had good merit.
I don't disagree. The one that I'm most concerned with is the Ag Pres. We'll continue to have that and the schools. My biggest fear is that looming cliff, but that's all right. Okay, we could do that. I mean, has anybody got an issue with that?
Nope. Oh, do we need a second? Second.
Okay. Any conversation, discussion?
I see the bottom line real quick. So what we're proposing right now, just for clarification purposes, we're going to vote on all the changes this morning, but those are only a temporary hold, correct?
Sure. Yeah, everything
Yep.
is, yeah,
Just kinda
Yeah. So-
hit save on it, basically, and
yeah.
we still have to
So-
vote on it at some
And
point.
they're in, these are the ones in gray, right?
And I know we've got a couple with asterisks that are still in the mix, so that's,
Yeah.
I need to have some conversations, I think.
Yep. Okay, is there anything else we want to go further with right now? Or are we ready to just vote on this and take a break? Okay, I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, before we recess, is there any desire, although Ted may get frustrated with me saying this, for having somebody coming in this afternoon that is burning for us to move forward with?
I apologize, I didn't quite understand.
Is there any desire for somebody coming in this afternoon to have a conversation with for
Oh,
us to
okay.
move forward?
I thought you said something about burning.
Well, yeah, is there a burning desire?
Oh, okay. All right, sorry, I was taking notes, I apologize.
I think I think we are on a good glide path right now. I'd hate to disrupt that. I think we're probably, I'm not sure I need to hear from anybody right now, but I could be
Yeah,
overruled on that.
no, all understood. Is there,
Well, and my question would be to you guys, what do we look at next?
Let's keep going.
We've hit some of the big things. We added in some relatively smaller things. We've about exhausted the request. I don't know, and Ed, you brought it up twice. Do you want to talk more about the sheriff's question? Do we want to do that this afternoon? Because what I'm wondering, based on what we want to talk about,
Yeah.
do we need, because like, for instance, if you
Yeah.
want to talk about it,
yeah,
I'd be curious, includes pension, payroll taxes, overtime, night, et cetera, plus a child support position, so, I don't
no,
remember
remember.
what all was in that ad.
I think that, and I would like to further have a conversation on revenue, on taxes.
Yep,
Because if we have an opportunity to look out through 2029 and balancing a budget, it is something we haven't done in a while. And it could be something done appropriately, setting us up for success moving forward into what's inevitable. And we know that. And that's my biggest concern. That's going to hit us, over this budget cycle, over the next couple of years. So that's what I want to have the conversation about. Not saying I want to do it, but I want to show what the changes could be.
And I've
So-
asked this probably every session, I'm waiting for you to throw something. We're very comfortable with the revenue that we've projected in here is a little safe, but we think it's a good picture of what our revenue's gonna be for '24.
As comfortable as we can be. And again, there is still a big question mark on income tax. So we still have half of what we're going to collect this year to see. You'll be making your decisions before we know anything more. And we believe we're seeing a shift now in income tax, but, you know, we don't know.
So are you saying we should be more aggressive in trying to assume that might be better, or you're saying we're already?
No, I think there's
too
more
aggressive?
downside than
You're already
upside
too
now.
aggressive.
You believe there's more downside?
I'm saying there's more downside risk than there is
Than
upside. Doesn't mean it couldn't still be better than we've
Oh,
projected.
I understand.
But if I had to bet one way or the other, I'd be putting my money on we won't do as well as we've expected. Like I said, we did not react this way, but I told you a number of counties have moved to building no growth in income tax into their FY24 budget. We still have 4% built in, or approximately 4.
And I'll get mixed up, but recordation or transfer tax or what, there was one number we looked at that maybe could be increased, but I don't remember it. It doesn't increase with income, but it increases with the value of the property. So, you know, who is it fair to, who isn't it fair to? Would that be, if we're gonna talk about revenue and taxes,
I
is
always
that
ask
one
the
we
same
should talk
question.
about?
So property regressive, and I'm doing this to make sure I get it, impacts lower income. Income tax progressive impacts higher income. Recordation regressive impacts lower income.
Yeah, and with all those, it's relative. You know, it's just, it has
That
a
hurts.
greater impact.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because a property tax increase impacts anybody who has property. You know, it's just a
Right.
question of who does it have a greater impact on.
And we have a ceiling on income tax, and we do not have a ceiling on property tax.
Right.
And the last time they've been adjusted was around 2012, 13, and 14, give or take.
Those were the last decreases,
Well, those were the last changes,
yes.
yeah.
But not everybody knows the history, so somebody could think a change means an increase.
Correct. Yeah, and some of the comments, you know, you see on social media or text, you know, stop raising my taxes. And we haven't. You know, the county has not raised taxes in quite some time.
Yeah, that goes probably close to 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, people may be referring to assessments, so in theory, I mean, their property taxes did go up.
Oh, with
It
that
wasn't-
stat.
that was the state.
Assessments.
That was assessments, not,
Well,
that wasn't
but-
the county, that's important.
But they,
It's a good
with
point.
assessments, they only go up based on the value of what they're worth.
But people
So
don't
in
recognize.
theory,
But when you're living in a house, you don't see the value of your house going up, you see the taxes
you're
going
either
up.
gonna sell it or die, or
Well,
somehow it's gonna change hands. So
I know.
back to recordation taxes, how do they get increased? And you showed 5 to 6, but it could be 550. What happens to increase those?
That's in your hands.
Totally.
You can set it anywhere you want.
Those three taxes.
Well, I was speaking specifically of recordation.
Well,
recordation.
Property tax
And income.
and income tax up to
Up to
3.2.
3.2.
Ted, you mentioned the projections potentially being lower for incoming revenue on the second half. how much, and I know this is a very abstract and not easy question, how much lower potentially do you think that may be?
Well, right now, we are not expecting it to be lower, but income tax can change suddenly by noticeable amounts. I would not be shocked for it to be several $1 million less than we've projected. Again, not expecting it, but I can't sit here and tell you that that's not going to happen. With property tax, it's different. We know that that's not suddenly going to change like that.
In the meantime, I think I know I got the sticky about when taxes were decreased, but if we can get shown to us the tax changes, last time they were increased and then last time they were decreased, I think is valuable, again, because I do agree with Commissioner Garing, sometimes it doesn't matter what we say or what, we're talking about. I mean, if their taxes go up, whether it's from SDAT assessments or not, it's taking money out of their pockets, and it's the big government, whether it's local, state, or federal. But sometimes education, is a good thing, and we have a lot of big rocks that we're paying for, that we, okay. Yeah, I think if we can start maybe with this, I think it'd be a good idea. What other thoughts do you have right now?
Before we break, can you remind me again, that line 81, that figure of 3.1 million, that's what we're collecting at the $5 rate right now? What is
Yes.
the delta for the 6? Do I see it in there? If it went to 6 from 5,
If it went from 5 to 6, the increase in revenue would be $3.1 million.
okay. And keeping in mind.
Why does that decrease in future years?
Our projection for recordation is declining.
So you think it's going to be,
Because the housing market has been so hot that we've
Yes.
had significant increases over the last three years of recordation taxes. So the thought is that that's not going to continue, that we can't continue at that sustained high level of
Remember,
you don't have it by a lot.
the revenue is caused by how many transactions are there and what's the value of those
You think
transactions.
there's going to be less.
Right, we think transactions are going to go down. We're not expecting prices to continue increasing
Yep.
like they have. And we have actually started to see the turn in activity now.
Yeah, the total value currently of recordation taxes, what we bring in is what, like 17 or 18 million, something like that?
Yeah, but we're projecting 15.5
Or
for
in
FY
24.
'24.
But last year it was, in the last couple of years, it's been recordation.
Yes.
Right. But that is no longer.
Just doesn't seem sustainable.
Okay. So we'll recess, and the two topics are dealing with the sheriff and having those conversations,
And you want the history of the taxes.
history of taxes and what we're talking about here. Anything else in preparation for this afternoon that we want the team to look at?
I know it's early, and I know that the whole PFAS remediation thing is ongoing. Just doing some quick research on my phone in the last couple of minutes, I've seen numbers for that ranging anywhere from $2 to $7 million. Is there anywhere that I can go to, or is there anywhere you suggest that I can look to find a more, I guess, accurate, not accurate, but closer to the margin?
No, because we're really just figuring this out now. There's very little to go on.
And then I should explain that the reason why the range was there between the 2 and the 7 was depending on the process that was employed for the remediation. So that's why I was wondering, maybe if there was something that was, I guess, a more solid number that we could work with for that, because, like Commissioner Guerin, I'm still, I wonder if maybe it should be 2 instead of 1.5 that we remove. I don't know.
Well, we don't have a solid number. We can't tell you, here's how to calculate the right number. So you can reduce it. I don't know that will be okay. It could be that we'll just have to come back to it later. And it might be that we've targeted too much right now, but we don't know that it's enough either.
Right. That's fair. Thank you, Ted.
Just the revenue.
Because there's other ways to skin the cat, whether it's reserved for contingency that one time. I mean, in emergencies, we have methods, not the preferred methods. You want to be able to
Right.
plan it out and, put it on paper, then execute it when available. But sometimes, if you can't, and we know we have that piggy bank we can crack open, but again, that's not the preferred
Right.
method.
But I appreciate that we're
Yeah.
looking at this from every single possible
Absolutely.
perspective.
Yeah, no, I agree. Anything else for the good of the group?
Quick question, and I don't remember the exact numbers when they were in previously, but with Board of Ed, obviously, we really don't know the numbers. We all know that. Was there any one specific number that kind of was their sum total? Because they were jumping around quite a bit. It was 2 million for X. It was, 40 million over here.
We're implementing Blueprint.
Correct, yes.
No, I think they're just taking their best shot at trying to estimate
Sure.
what the impacts are going to be. Much like we can't give you the number on PFAS remediation, I don't believe they can give us the number on what implementation is going to be.
No, and I agree with you. I guess my question would be, since we're looking at numbers today and we're looking at money we have potentially in the piggy bank or whatever else, would it be beneficial for all of us to, let's throw in an outlying year, let's throw in $30 million, $25 million, let's see how ugly it gets, just out of curiosity, so we actually know what that cliff may or may not look like hypothetically. Just a thought.
In 25,
Yes,
26, yeah?
just a thought.
Very steep.
No, it's,
I
you
don't-
want to consider everything. that's
Listen,
the-
I don't disagree. I think it's going to be a very steep cliff, like going up Normandy. Yeah, we can look at that. The numbers I've heard, I don't know, Kenny, between 32 and 50
Yeah.
have been the two numbers, 32 million to 50 million. And I'm like, okay.
See, and the other thing we need to remember there, even if we can identify the number, we don't know that that's our responsibility
Yep.
yet. Or even
Right,
if it kind of by default is our responsibility, what responsibility are we going to choose to take on?
right.
So I believe ideally, we would be building something into the plan because I think we feel pretty comfortable we're going to end up having to do something.
Right.
And I'd rather be closer than further away from it. But, what's that number? We could pick a dozen different numbers and make equally good cases for any of them.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Anything else for the good of the group? We have a motion and a second to recess till 1 PM. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.